Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General.
Thank you, sir.
I posed the same question to the FBI director. I want your advice, and I'd like to work with you. In my hometown of Chicago, there are 40, 50 shootings any given weekend. That's a whole classroom of children, and it's unacceptable. And we need more federal action, I think, because whatever we do in Chicago, according to a city report from the mayor's office and the Chicago Police Department, 60% of the guns are coming from Wisconsin, Indiana, and Mississippi, all states that have weaker gun laws than the city of Chicago does. We know this thanks to the Chicago Police Department's tracking of trace data, meaning that the Chicago Police Department traces every single gun it recovers to determine whether it was originally sold and how it may have entered the illegal market. So given that the majority party in Congress refuses to take up, despite widespread and robust support for gun control legislation, a couple of questions. What's your advice to me as an individual member of Congress who supports gun control, and how can I help curb gun violence in Chicago? And second, will the Justice Department encourage the police departments everywhere in the nation to collect trace data on illegal gun trafficking like we do in Chicago? So first, you're in Chicago, you're a member of Congress, what's your advice? And second, trace the guns. We're doing it in Chicago. What do you think about across the nation?
Congressman, thank you for the question. You certainly raise an area of concern and priority for the Department of Justice, which is, of course, violence, be it gun violence or any type of violence in our cities as it affects our children, not only those who are the actual victims, but children who are exposed to violence, of course, suffer greatly, as we know, in their later development as well. We feel that the city of Chicago is certainly taking a concerted look at this problem. And I'm extremely proud to note that the federal government, through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago, is working very closely with local law enforcement on this issue, focusing on the issue of not just firearms, but also the gang violence in Chicago as well. We also have a very strong presence with our federal agencies, FBI as well as ATF, who works closely with the Chicago Police Department on the E-Trace program that you mentioned. We do find it to be a very useful program. We do find it to be something that arms us with the data to trace the source of weapons into neighborhoods who suffer so grievously from them. And certainly it's an example that certainly we would hope could be exported to other cities as well, as you have noted. And I can tell you that we are committed to continuing to work with the city of Chicago and all of our major cities in violence reduction programs. In fact, Chicago was represented at the Violence Reduction Summit that I held just last month with the mayor and the police chief, and we had a very robust discussion about the causes of violence, some of the ways in which the department could be helpful in very targeted ways, whether it is increasing our task force presence, whether it is focusing on dangerous fugitives in the area, whether it is focusing on violence prevention efforts as well. So we remain committed to working not just with Chicago, but all of our cities who are experiencing these troubling issues.
So if you were to suffer something as egregious as a demotion to a member of Congress from your high position as Attorney General, what do you think? What would you do? You're back in Chicago. You got demoted. You're not the Attorney General. You're just one of us, 430.
Well, I certainly would not call that a demotion. I think all of us in public service have a great opportunity
I guess you get my
to serve our people. To serve our people. And certainly I think that within this body there's a lot of significant discussion going on. Obviously the resources to fund the programs that we have on the ground are essential in funding the department's budget that focuses on the Smart on Crime initiative, which does focus on violence reduction as well as reentry and recidivism, because of course a grave concern is as people return home to their communities that they not return to violence as well. So certainly the resources that would be useful for the department's overall budget, and particularly when it comes to firearms, the resources for ATF to continue its vigorous enforcement of the firearms laws and the E-Trace program would be very beneficial.
Lastly, I want to, so there's a letter from my colleagues, Congressman Ruben Gallegos and Robin Kelly from Chicago. And they've asked to meet with you with a group of members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and Black Caucus. And I want to put it in some context for all the members and why we would invite you to meet, particularly with that group. Because African Americans are 13% of the population, but they constitute over half of all the homicides, over half. So 13%, 55%, all the deaths given on firearms. And interesting, Latinos are relatively less likely to own a firearm than the general population. And yet again, they disproportionately die due to gun violence. So you have a population that doesn't own guns, but dies of guns, and 13% black population and over half of the deaths. So just, would you, I know you got, I hope you got the letter, and so I love working with those two colleagues of mine, and I was wondering if you would accept an invitation to come and meet with us.
I look forward to meeting with the caucus. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Attorney General.